Hello, and welcome to Message in the Middle with Marianne. We all know that life is hard, right? It's messy, it's unpredictable, but it can be wonderful all at the same time. My hope is that we can take a deep dive into self-development topics and explore life's lessons through book clubs, conversations, and interviews. And together, we can uncover the lessons that others have already learned to help us navigate this crazy, wonderful ride called life. Hello and welcome back to Message in the Middle. I'm your host, Marianne, and joining me today is Wendy Leggett. Wendy is a certified coach and owner of Conflux Retirement Coaching, specializing in non-financial retirement life planning. With 25 years of corporate sales leadership experience, she guides clients through a fulfilling retirement transition, focusing on well-being, identity, feelings of purpose, connectedness, and positive aging. Wendy holds advanced credentials from the Retirement Project, Retirement Life Plan, and Positive Intelligence, and she's also co-authored the book, The Retirement Collective. Good morning, Wendy. So glad to have you here with me today.
It's terrific to be here. Thank you so much.
So I'm really excited to dig into this topic because while I always use the word coaching a little tongue-in-cheek, these guys know that by now, I haven't heard of retirement coaching before. This is the first. You were the first. So I'm excited to hear more. What does retirement coaching look like? What does working with you look like?
Yeah, and thanks for that question. And you're definitely not alone, Marianne, because a lot of people think that I invented this, which gosh, I wish I had. But, and maybe I have in a way, but no. So the concept behind retirement life coaching, differentiated from retirement planning, which is along your financial foundations and things, is really that we step into, well, every milestone in life, every transition, we step in as a whole person. Like if you think back when you were going maybe from, if someone did from high school to college, or from college to career, high school to career, or even a single person to being married, any of those milestone moments, yes, there was a financial component. You know, when you thought about a college, let's say you're going to be thinking, can I afford it? What are the costs? But you're also going to think, what's the course of study? Does the campus feel good to me? Is it in a location that I like? What's the vibe? You know, what will be the things that I can springboard off into my future with? All of those things go far beyond financial. So why would we think it any differently when we leave career and we move into retirement? And yet people feel that, and understandably, that they've done the hard work, they've sacrificed, they've saved, they've strategized to have that financial wherewithal. So their heavy lifting is over. But yet we bring our whole selves into that next chapter. And if we don't think about things like, who am I without my work? You know, what is my identity? Or that feeling of purpose that we hear about so much that's baked into work. And as humans, we want to feel like we matter. Or that, gosh, now it's downhill from here. And some people feel put out to pasture and feel as though, you know, it's now about aging and loss. And maybe for some, 1 foot in the grave. We want to change that perspective. But if we don't even have an awareness about it, we can carry all of those things and so many more into retirement. Does that kind of land?
Yeah, it does. There's so many things there. I was trying to think through why we don't think about that. And I think the thing that jumped up at me was we do think of our finances first because, let's face it, many people are working because they need to make money, right? So I think everybody gets focused on the when do I have enough, or when can I get to this position where I'm, you know, getting supplemented or whatever the situation so I can stop having to earn. But they don't really think about those other things.
Yeah.
So that's so interesting to me. Yeah. And I think you hit on what was going to be my second question to you is, have you seen people struggle with finding identity in retirement? Because I can so relate to having your whole identity being tied up into who you are at work, what you do.
Yes.
So how do you help people, and have you seen that? Have you seen people struggle with that? And how do you help people through that to basically find their own identity?
Yeah, yeah, such a core question. I want to circle back for a moment about, when you're mentioning why don't people think beyond the finances? And I love that question. And teasing it out a little bit more, for me, it almost brings up this idea that we put so much weight around hard skills versus soft skills,
Yes.
in the black and white, and money is a black and white. And this piece about how do I want to feel in retirement, or I'm concerned about it. I've had clients say, I feel lost in the desert, or I'm going to fail at retirement, or I'm confused, or I've never enjoyed hobbies or had hobbies. Now, where do I go? All of those are kind of that soft side, and that those are easier to push aside as opposed to looking at a bank account or an investment portfolio. So I think that's part of it too. But if we put it all aside or we push it all down, then we're really not able to bring that whole view into such a unique and exciting opportunity. 1 in 3 struggle in retirement.
Mm.
And I think that's the shocker. And I think that's where I'm really able, and other retirement coaches are able to really bring value and support, because so often people think, well, I'm the only one that missed the memo. I'm the only one that's struggling. And so they're not going to raise their hand. If they're asked, how's retirement going? They're going to say, it's great. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
If they were to say it wasn't, then it would be like, wow, you're so lucky you're not working. So
Yeah.
there's shame or a kind of hesitance around even raising our hand. But
Mm.
you mentioned then about the struggle and, what comes up for people. And it really is this idea that oftentimes we don't envision something beyond where we're at. And so we're enmeshed in our work. We're busy, busy, busy. We may or may not have balance, but there are other aspects of our lives we haven't really looked at. And now we're considering that, and we're very unclear. And we know that in order to get to a destination, or at least move in the direction, we have to have a direction to begin.
Yeah.
And so otherwise, like that client, you're wandering, you're lost in the desert. So that's where we want to start to really envision. So one of the first questions I really ask is, how do you define retirement? You and I were speaking earlier about, that word really is passé.
Yeah.
It belonged in our vernacular when we were, in the fields and the factories in the 30s. And when we got to a certain age, people were tired because they were physically taxed.
Mm.
And so then Social Security was developed to allow them to have that bridge. But people generally didn't last much longer after they retired. They expired. Well, things have dramatically changed now, but it's a word that we all share. Yet, does it really connect? So, getting back then to that question I asked, how do you define retirement? I had a client, it doesn't happen too often, that engaged me. We were working, and it became very clear to me that she wasn't ready to retire. She was getting a lot of pressure from family and friends to retire, but she was very gratified by her work. She loved having the income. She felt that she had balance. They were wanting her to all join in because they had retired early, but maybe she wasn't wanting to do that too. And so it's really a matter of us taking that accountability. I talked about being the CEO of you and taking this leadership role in your life, making some of those decisions, because we know if we don't make the decisions, life will make them for us.
Mm.
So when people come to me, it's like, I know that I want more, but I don't really know how to make that happen. Or I know that I'll probably check off things on my to-do list and my bucket list, but then what? Because that honeymoon phase will wear out. So I kind of went around in a lot of places.
I'm thinking about myself and how you do get busy lifing. And I don't think this is something you stop and think about. I mean, you might think about it to put a number to it. Okay, I'm retiring at 62 or 65 or whatever the norms are. But I don't think most people stop and think about what that really looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, as I was telling you before we got on the air, for me, I do think I got a glimpse of that when I took 6 months off between careers and spent a great deal of time self-reflecting. But I don't think that most people are afforded with that opportunity or even realize that it's something they should do. So how do you shift that? How do you get people to realize it is something they need to do And how do you get them thinking about it? They got to look within. They got to start remembering if they didn't have hobbies. Your point was a lot of people don't even have hobbies. That was me. I had zero balance, all those things. So kind of unwinding that, it takes a lot of self-reflection.
Yeah, or even know how to begin.
Yeah.
We can get these really deep questions. It's like, I don't know,
Yeah.
or you answer the
Yes.
question, but maybe it's not really getting at the core. And so when you were mentioning, having that opportunity to think about it, working with someone like me helps accelerate it.
Mm,
We have a pathway, we have a roadmap instead of, ping ponging off of different areas. We were able to kind of step through step by step, the smallest steps, not jumping into something, but there really is a process because I mentioned, asking that question first. How do you even define retirement? And then really looking at what are you bringing with you into retirement? Because this is a new chapter, but it's not a new book.
yeah.
It's not like starting over. So let's really key in on what skills, passions, interests, capabilities we have that we want to bring with us. Maybe not in the same way, but they're certainly transferable. And just as importantly, maybe even more so, is what do we want to leave behind?
Mm,
Because we know when people transition, whether it's into retirement or into a different career or being from single to being married or into parenthood, that's a transition. We're seeing a change in roles on the external, but internally, inside, there are a lot of changes that are going on. And if we overlook those changes, then we can also not really connect with who we are or what's important to us. So that's an important area as well, is what do you want to leave behind? And people oftentimes jump right into retirement. You may know of friends or seen family members and things where they're so busy. They're saying, "Oh, I've never been busier in my life,"
yes.
because they jump right into that new beginning. But I get clients that say, "I'm so exhausted, I might as well go back to work and get paid for it." Or this isn't really
Mm,
what I thought it would be because I'm doing the same old, and it's starting to feel like Groundhog's Day. Is this all there is for me? And that's where we want to really roll back and say, are we filling time or is it fulfilling time? Are we really thinking about the things that matter to us? And it's not like it has to matter with a capital P purpose. It can feel purposeful with a small p, as Richard Leiter says, but really allowing ourselves to see what feels good, and what makes a difference for us or those that matter to us or in our community, etc. But if we
mm.
just leave it to chance and we're one day we're in, the next day we're out, then it's no wonder that people can feel stuck or feel confused or overwhelmed or disappointed and have, buyer's remorse about making that decision.
Such great points. Such great points. I'm curious about what you've seen when it comes to couples retiring together. Again, self reflecting here. My husband and I are so very different and will want such very different things during retirement.
Mm.
He will want to retire and putz around and have a lot of time to himself, and I will not. So,
Well, and you align with what studies tell us because then these are generalities, but men and women enter into retirement in different ways. Men, and again, these are, averages. It doesn't apply to
yeah.
everybody. Men look at it as a time of rest and relaxation, and women look at it as a time of reimagining and rejuvenation. So
Oh,
we can see right there that there's potentially a gap.
yeah.
So when you mention you and your husband are very different, then we really want to make sure that we are communicating. And it kind of has to start with having a vision ourselves, because if we don't have a little bit of a vision ourselves that we can articulate and discuss, then right there, we're kind of depending on the other person to figure out the compass or have the roadmap. So we look at ourselves first, and then we come together and we discuss it. I have a great assessment, a conversation starter for those kinds of things so that there aren't assumptions and there aren't expectations that haven't been voiced. And that we really do start to see, okay, this is my vision and I'm hearing your vision. So where can we combine and where can we go off and do our own thing and then come back together and bring that enrich the relationship. So it's not, again, every relationship's different, but it's not that you have to walk hand in hand into the future together. You can have your different interests and hobbies or businesses or whatever it is that you want to pursue, but at the same time, then bringing those things back so that the relationship stays solid. Maybe the question for you came up too, because we see that there is a rise in divorces in the 50 plus age group. They're called graying divorces or silver splitters. I don't care for the terms, but the reality is, and this is again one of those dark sides of retirement. There's a struggle in retirement. We also see that there's potentially the split for people.
Wow.
Well, communication is key.
Hmm. Wow, that is really interesting. I hadn't heard of that statistic. I wonder if people had done more upfront planning to get aligned, if that would help with that statistic.
But it makes sense in a way, right? I mean, think about too that I shared this idea of rejuvenation. So it's like this next step, and then somebody else is looking at rest and relaxation.
Yeah,
That's a big gap. And that can
big
bring a
gap.
lot of disappointment, that can bring a lot of disconnect. And also, at least for myself, and I think the majority of people, probably you as well, I've never been around my husband 24/7. I mean, maybe on vacation, I guess, but retirement is a 20 to 30 year potentially quote unquote vacation. You're going to
Yeah,
potentially be in everyone's space. I think the pandemic brought people more into their homes. And so maybe they were in each other's space a little more, but still in the main, that's a lot of togetherness.
for sure.
If you haven't been around somebody like that or that in that kind of way for that kind of extended period, again, it makes sense. So we want to
Yeah.
go in with eyes wide open. I talk about it having a realistic optimism, not idealistic, where it's rose-colored glasses, endless weekends, vacation, leisure travel, or on the other end of the spectrum, pessimistic. As I shared, one foot into the grave, loss, feeling that aging. We want to have this realistic optimism. And that comes with having a vision.
Mm.
And that comes with having a commitment to ourselves that we're going to make these decisions and that we're going to move forward. It doesn't mean that we can't pivot. It does mean we should experiment and not jump all in,
Yeah.
but at the same time that we have some clarity about what direction we're going in.
Are you seeing a uptick in people that are jumping into their own careers or another career or what we would call a side hustle if they were in their primary job? I'm envisioning because people are living so much longer. Back to your point, it's not like we retire and then we quickly expire. Hopefully there's 20 or 30 years. I have to think that there's more people that want to keep, I'm going to use air quotes, working in some way, shape or form. Are you seeing that?
Yeah, and I think that gets back to this. The word retired is really passe.
Yeah.
Like I'm of an age that I could be retired. People assumed when I made my shift from my corporate career into then entrepreneurship and going back to school and becoming a certified coach and opening my business that I had retired. But I've not retired. So how do we define it?
Yeah.
So when you say air quotes working, I think it's a matter of are we working as you shared earlier, because we have to. So does retirement open up more opportunity to pursue something that is more aligned with feelings of purpose or more aligned
Mm.
with things that have always interested us that we wanted to go after? How do we define it? The term is just, it doesn't connect. But here I'm a retirement coach. So of course I use that terminology, but I don't advocate for retiring. I do advocate for not abdicating when we make that decision. So
Mm.
let's retire well. Let's retire with eyes wide open and really making some of those decisions that are available to us if we only step into them.
What would you say is ideal, not ideal retirement age? I think that's different for everybody, but for having someone engage with someone like you or even start doing the work on their own to really start planning and self-reflecting and kind of building that vision. Because I imagine if we did it too early, if we did it in our 30s and we weren't going to retire for, say, 30 more years, things change a lot, right? So
We
what's
do.
the good window there that people should really start thinking about that?
Yes. Well, and I appreciate you bringing up, in your 30s, because I totally agree. And yet, for any of you listeners that aren't feeling like you're anywhere close to retiring, just having this in the back of your mind, just an awareness, just raising up that reminder that at some point in time, you're going to want to start to look at more. And so, or what's next and what's important to you. And that should really be woven into our lives. But retirement is a very unique chapter because it really opens up the door to so
Yeah.
much that we maybe haven't been able to step into. And it also doesn't tend to have that roadmap. Like you said, I've never heard of a retirement life coach. That's because we don't really think about it, but yet it's so important at any milestone moment. To answer your question, the sweet spot is in like a 1 to 3 years beforehand. I've
Mm.
worked with clients who are very planful and map that out sooner. Certainly, business owners. I don't think in my opinion, you would want to have that a longer window. But the 1 to 3 years, what it allows for, Marianne, is a runway to retirement. So I mentioned not jumping right into something. This gives us a chance to start to build those new habits. So often we hear people saying, when I retire, I'll get healthy. When I
Yes.
retire, I'll start exercising. When I retire, I'll travel a bunch. Well, let's pepper it in along the way. And so when I work with clients in advance, and I work with clients who have already retired too, but when I work with them, then we're able to take this step by step. And I've had some who have started with me and they've decided to retire earlier than they had planned because they start to get so excited
Mm.
about this vision of what's next. And they see that they could have retired, earlier, but they just didn't have any clarity. So they might as well just keep doing what they're doing. We don't want to phone in on our lives. And so anytime that we're able to make those decisions, and I understand financially, oftentimes we can't just step into retirement, but let's make sure that when we've made the decision, then let's reverse engineer and make sure that we're taking those steps. Another beautiful byproduct of planning ahead is that we are able to try out these things and experiment and build up some new habits and get ourselves primed for the pump. And another byproduct is that, there's that short timer syndrome that we see so often when people are retiring in the last 3 months, 6 months, year, when they've declared that they're going to retire, then people feel like, wow, you're kind of not really, you're not showing up the same way.
Yeah.
Instead of that, by having this runway, we can really map out how we can leave that strong legacy in the work that we're doing and leave people in great shape, and then go with that strength and springboard into our next chapter. And what a beautiful transition that is. And so that's very gratifying for people as well. So that's the sweet spot,
Mm.
is really that 1 to 3 years beforehand. If you're a business owner, or you're really enmeshed in the work and there's a lot that you need to do to hand it off and start to transition more slowly, then maybe expand that. But it's individual, and I meet people where they stand. So I've had people who retired, a month into it, then they're knocking on my door.
What do
A
I
couple of
do?
years after.
What do
Yeah.
I do?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Or, I've traveled, but I can already see that there's not enough for me. Or I didn't call you because I thought there wasn't anybody that could help me, but now I discovered that there is.
I do imagine, and I did this when I took my short break for 6 months. There's this to-do list. You mentioned it, and everybody has a to-do list you never get time to do. I mean, my cabinets and my closets were so organized. They'd never seen that kind of organization in 30 years.
Yes.
But you do run out of that
You
list.
do. Yeah. Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
And I do want to offer your listeners a really great exercise called the No Regrets Retirement, where to your point, you start to envision that day and envision that week and really start to map out what's the perfect retirement and what you'll be doing in it. And very quickly, people start to see, wow, I'm going to kind of run out of road pretty quick here. Or, oh, that's what it looks like. And then also in that exercise, then we say, instead of having this time abundance, because you and I spoke about this 20 to 30 years potentially after typical retirement age, instead of looking at it as time abundance in this exercise, we say, okay, now you have limited time. So what would be the priorities and what are you waiting for? And so that's what I work with clients on as well, is really saying, let's not assume that we have beyond today, because today is the only day that we have promised to us. And so let's really be thinking about what else will feel meaningful and purposeful to us, or gratifying or exciting or fulfilling, or any of those things. So that's a great way to take this kind of nebulous fuzzy view and bring it into maybe more clarity.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. I'm sitting here curious too about in this time period where there's many of us now that have aging parents, even as we get into retirement, we may still have aging parents and children or grandchildren, both. I'm imagining that there may be some expectations that people have to deal with because I can imagine that sometimes when you retire and you free up, family suddenly thinks, oh, well, you can help. You can take mom to all the appointments, or you can sit with mom all day long, or you can watch the kids or the grandkid, whatever the situation is.
Yes,
And so I'm thinking that some people have to deal with that dynamic and
absolutely.
creating some boundaries. Do you see that?
Yes, definitely. And you're speaking to that sandwich generation where we have children and we have aging parents or parents, and the club sandwich generation where we have grandchildren as well
Yeah.
added in there. And so this gets down to that communication, and this gets down to that having a vision, because if we don't have a vision, then we're a little more prey to, yes, take care of the grandkids, or yes, go on the doctor's appointments and things. But if we have a vision, and we can articulate it, then we can have those boundaries and we can have those discussions, those loving discussions. On the flip side, too, that oftentimes when people retire, they think, oh, we'll move closer to our family, to our kids and our grandkids. And that can work. But if it's not been communicated and thought through, it could well be that they're making that decision unilaterally. They haven't really had that discussion with their children, to really have a meeting of the minds and an understanding, and like you said, some boundaries. So I've had people who have up and moved to be closer, and then the family members, the children, get new jobs and they move elsewhere. So
Ouch.
now what? But if there had been a discussion and an understanding, not to say that things don't happen in life, they do,
Sure.
but we're going in with a different mindset. We're going in with one that we're not so attached to a certain circumstance, and that we see the possibilities and that we are able to pivot. And that's something that I think a retirement coach can bring to the table in the conversation with clients too,
Mm.
is this idea of having that outlook, that perspective, that there are possibilities. And even if there are pitfalls, that we can pivot. So a lot of the work that I do is around mental fitness. We're physically fit, but we oftentimes don't really build up that mental strength as well, where we can pivot through these things and look at the positive side of things, not from a toxic positivity side, a realistic one, but yet one that we can really build off of. So that was a lot there too. What's coming up for you?
Well, it's coming up for me is the comment on fitness. And I think, not to be a hypocrite, I'll be transparent. Again, people know I'm not fully where I want to be, but I'm very much cognizant of the fact that now is what matters for retirement age, right? Like, I and everybody listening, you need to get your ducks in a row on that front, because if you can't be healthy in your retirement ages, it limits what you can do and how you do it. So now's the
Yes.
time.
Yeah. When we think of taking care of grandkids, being active, when we think of going on these wonderful trips that we're thinking about, and
Yeah.
probably seeing, I have too, that there have been travelers that are really struggling, and you think, wow. And in some cases, that's out of their control, but there's so
Yes.
much that's in our control. And even looking at, a healthy cognitive environment for ourselves, that's critically important too. And all of those things, that's that deferred gratification. So we're making potentially, hopefully, these sacrifices, strategies around financial savings. What are we doing for saving us of our health, so that we're not just having this lifespan, but we're having this health span as well?
Yeah. I
And
like
so
that.
I think that's important. I think too, and I want to explore this more myself, because we spoke about 20 to 30 years in retirement, but it really doesn't, and it won't be, and it isn't this block of time. We haven't broken it down in our vocabulary, the different, like we go from being a young adult to an adult to then maybe an older adult and then elderly. But within that 20 to 30 years, there can be segments. We don't need to be looking at it that, oh, I'm going to now make this long view decision and I have to be committed to it for this amount of time. No, we can keep iterating. We can keep exploring. We can keep trying things. And so you're not healthy today from a physical standpoint. And I'm speaking generally, not to you specifically, from your own view. But what's that one little step that you can take right now?
Yes.
Instead of, again, one day you're in and the next day you're out. It's so black or it's so white.
Yeah.
We don't need to live in an either or world. We can live in a both and,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do. I love that. And I love calling out that we can break that segment of time into chunks,
Yeah.
or just not even think about it in chunks at all. Just think about it as an ongoing progression or of change, because often we do get sort of, I'll say stuck, even though we're not really stuck ever, but you do get in this space with your primary job a lot of times where you do stay because you've been in it, you've put so much in it, and at this point it just makes sense to kind of finish it out and to spend those years continuing to get better or climb, whatever it is in your career. Whereas when you get into this segment of life, there isn't that prize, I'll say, of, getting the next title or getting another lift in pay or whatever. It's more about your own personal satisfaction. So I do think it's an important distinction.
Yes, yeah. And that idea that, well, then what could be the prizes,
Yeah.
and just redefining. And so when I had one client say, I feel like I'm going to fail in retirement, and I said, well, what would failure look like, and what does it even belong in your world? You're at choice. You can really take that word out of your vocabulary.
Yeah.
We can flip the script. But again, it takes that awareness and it takes that compassion for ourselves too, and recognizing this is a whole new venture. Again, you're not a whole new person. You're bringing a lot with you. But if you don't look at everything that you have in your toolkit already and you feel like you're walking with an empty one, then it's no wonder that we might feel overwhelmed, or for some stuck,
Yeah.
or for some confused, or thinking, I don't belong here, don't know what to do. So I think it does come with, again, really giving it that time and thought. I talk about, we think about people who are going from high school to college, they take that gap period.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that when you had left corporate and then we're moving into something else, you took a period. And so let's take that period. If it's working with me, that's wonderful. If it's investigating things on your own, but I call it a gap that you're, get a pause, give a ponder, and whether it's for a week or it's for a year or anything in between, but let's be mindful and present about it. And let's make some decisions that we can then move forward with and springboard off of, rather than going into the honeymoon phase, which is typical of retirement. And then when the honeymoon is over, it's, the reality sets in, and we can have that realistic optimism. We don't have to have it be that struggle that I shared. To underscore that struggle, Marianne, research shows that on average, a retiree watches 47 hours of TV a week.
Wow.
So they basically then
Wow.
substituted a full-time job or thereabouts into a full-time job of watching TV. And I think this is really important to mention because it can be that slow burn, where no, the first day you're retired, maybe you're not watching TV 6, 7 hours a day, but yet it can start to build up, just like not eating well can start to build up, or not being active can start to build up. So let's go in aware of that to begin with, and recognize then how does it fit in our lives and how does it work against us? Because we know from a cognitive standpoint, from a physical standpoint, a mental standpoint, watching someone else's life on the screen rather than living our own just isn't going to be beneficial to anyone. And I think I want to say that this is why my work is so important, is that we're not put out to pasture when we move into retirement. We all have so much more to offer. Who you are and what you're capable of doesn't go away. And society needs you. Your family needs you. Be that role model. Be that person that you're really able to say and show, these are the things that I can bring into the world. This is who I am, and continue to build that legacy of wisdom and opportunity and contribution.
I love that. I mean, those pro-aging attitudes, and the shifts are vast now, and it's starting to be talked about in a different light. My
Yes.
friend Andy Lyons, she has the
Oh,
podcast Don't
I,
Be, do you know Andy?
I do.
Yeah, Don't Be Caged by Your Age. And she's really highlighting how vibrant life can be after 60 or after 65, and
Yeah.
how much can be accomplished and how people can find their dreams in that time period. So,
Because why not?
yeah, because why not? And I
Yeah.
do think we haven't seen a lot of examples of that before. And I think the work that she's doing and so many others are doing in that space now, it's so inspirational because it gives us a model to look forward to. We can all have those visions and all have those second, careers or
Yeah.
lives that really light us up. And I think that's so important because I do think if you look back 30 years, there wasn't anybody that we could look at and say, oh, I want that for myself once
Oh no, we didn't want it for
right,
yeah, we were doing everything we could to
right.
avoid ourselves. The whole anti-aging, which is, a term that I mean we've all used anti-aging. You purchase anti-aging things there, and now shifting that script and saying, no, this is pro-aging. We
Yeah.
all are getting older. At the day you were born, you're getting older.
Yes.
Why do we have such an aversion to it? And so I think that it's a really important perspective, and one that if we can really embody at any age, it's going to serve us well. Very interesting research done by Dr. Becca Levy around a positive pro-aging mindset. And the research shows that with that positive outlook as you age, you add 7.5 years to your life.
Wow, that's a
And
lot.
this is science, so it's not something that I'm just throwing out there. But on the opposite end, we can see then that if we don't have that kind of outlook and we start to feel like we're diminished, we're going to buy into that. Our mind is going to inform our body, hey, slow down, or hey, this isn't good for you. And so I think it's being shown that this pro-aging mindset serves us well to treat others in that way also, just open up our perspective because there's a lot of years and a lot of contribution left in all of us. So,
I love the shift. It's something that I've worked on myself because I definitely had an aversion to the thought of being older and in those later
yeah,
years. And I'm looking at it
yeah,
differently these days, but I've been there. So I think it does make a difference when you shift. So I have one last
yeah.
question as we start to wrap up, but I'm really curious about what surprises you in this space, in the retirement space and retirement readiness. I mean, what really stands out to you and has surprised you in the work you're doing?
I want to answer it twofold. It surprises me that people don't think that it's necessary.
Mm,
Like they'll think that, oh, that's so interesting, or I've never heard of that, but I don't need it, that it's a do-it-yourself kind of thing. And for many, you can read books, you can listen to podcasts, you can go to a seminar and things, and you can ingest that and you take it not from insight, but then into action. And that's fantastic. But for so many of us, we learn something, we think, oh, that was so interesting, but then we don't, that what we've learned peters away, and there's research around that as well.
yeah.
And so we want to have something that's sustainable. We want to step into that next chapter. Why aren't we investing in ourselves in that way? So that's the one side. And then the other side is that in such a quick time frame, people really, the sky's open for them. I had one client who was despondent about retiring. And I won't get into a long story at the end here, but it was just like in tears about it. She felt as though she was in education and felt like a part of her was being, ripped out. It felt like a death to her. And by my being able to just normalize it for her first and say, you're not alone. A lot of people feel this struggle, but it's that dirty little secret. That alone lifted such a weight.
Mm,
And then really being able to see you can transfer all of those passions that you have into a different way. And you're at choice. You don't have to retire, at least in her situation. She didn't have to. So she was choosing to. So then let's step into that fully and let some of those difficult or challenging emotions be recognized and then move forward. So I think that's the piece too, is that very quickly people can start to map out that next chapter in their lives. Very quickly, people can see, oh no, I didn't have hobbies, or I got disconnected from friends, or I really don't have anything that I'm thinking about doing beyond this and that on the bucket list. And then they start to see all the possibilities and get excited about it and start to feel like this does feel good to me and have that connection. I have been asked on different podcasts at times, like, what's the most interesting thing that somebody did or something like that. And I always answer back that I don't tend to want to share those kind of stories because that feels out of the realm of all of our possibilities. And that's not what this is about. It's not about then you have to be that Iron Man, or you have to
Yeah.
climb that summit, or you have to start a business and be wildly successful. None of those things. What it is about that mindset.
Yeah.
What it is about that vision for yourself in the future and that positive aging, pro-aging approach, and just contributing in whatever way. And maybe that's even just taking a class or reading a book, taking care of a neighbor for an afternoon, anything, everything, but stepping into it with that mindfulness and presence and appreciation.
I love that. And I get that completely. I wouldn't have asked that question because I feel like it's such a unique thing. And what lights me up might not light you up. And I think that's the important part is figuring out what lights you up and now
Yeah.
taking advantage of this time where you have less day-to-day commitment to pursue those things. So
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah. But it doesn't
different
have
for
to be
everybody.
something so monumental.
Yeah.
It's on your
Yeah.
terms. And I think that's where we can sometimes be feeling like, oh, we have to do these incredible things. It's kind of the Instagram life. And it's like,
Yeah.
no, just live it in a way that feels gratifying and exciting and fulfilling to you.
For me, that goes for when people are searching for their purpose, and I'm using air quotes down here under my desk, but
Yeah.
because I think it's very similar, right? Your purpose can be anything. The purpose can be making someone smile every day when you go outside and just hold the door for somebody.
Love that.
I mean, that might be your purpose, is to just lighten the world a little bit. I mean, it doesn't have to be solving world hunger or whatever, right?
No,
Right?
absolutely. And I love that you brought that up as an example because you just saying that just made me feel good. So if somebody were to do that and sprinkle that goodness, I mean, not
Yeah.
Pollyanna, but I mean, isn't that what it's all about, really?
Yes.
Yeah.
And listen, at this point right now in the world, we need a lot of that. So everybody go out and spread some kindness and some love out there.
Yeah.
This has been fabulous. Where do people find you most? Where are you most active?
On LinkedIn and starting to on Facebook a little more, but LinkedIn, and then at my website, which is confluxretirementcoaching.com.
Awesome. And we will put your links in the show notes for anybody that can't write that down right now, so they'll be able to reach out to you. Thank you so much for sharing the work you're doing and for the work you're doing, because I think it's needed. So,
well, I so appreciate your insightful questions and your insights as well. So thank you so much.
You are very welcome. Thank you for listening to this episode of Message in the Middle with Marianne. If you enjoyed the podcast, please take a minute to share it and write a review, as it helps bring new listeners to our audience. If you'd like to keep the conversation going between episodes, please join us at Facebook group Message in the Middle with Marianne.